Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out and listening to us and hopefully asking some really great questions. This is Humanities in Action, celebrating the stories that shape Pennsylvania's communities. And tonight we're really going to talk about the importance of stories and how they preserve history, they can foster understanding, and they can change lives. As I said, I'm Dawn Frisby Byers. I'm the Senior Director at PA Humanities. And joining me today is Laurie Zierer. She's Executive Director of PA Humanities. And Dr. Rhonda Matthews, the COO and co-founder of Erie Black Wall Street, among other things. Among other things. So starting tonight's program, I just want to start with a statement that everyone has a story. Everyone has lots of stories. Stories about your family, stories about your childhood, times that you probably should have gotten in trouble and you didn't. At least that's my story. And PA Humanity believes in the power of stories as a mainstay of human connection. So let's start first by talking about the humanities. Laurie, we've worked for years now trying to define the word humanities. You want to share our definition?
Absolutely. When I started a decade ago, I was asked again and again, could you define the humanities?
There we go.
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay. I was asked by many to define the humanities, and I said, watch what we can do with the humanities. We see the humanities not only as a subject, but we take those books off the shelves to put them in people's hands to take action in their communities and also for their own well-being and healing. For us, the humanities is more of a verb than a noun. It's a dynamic process. It's not a static definition.
Great. Thank you. And Rhonda, I know you use the humanities. Talk a little bit about how you use the humanities in your work.
Well, one of the things that the humanities does. Well, I want to talk about me personally first. One of the things that the humanities does for me personally is it provides a foundation, kind of a platform from which I lead. I have 3 different degrees. My first degree is in English literature. And so that's about storytelling and analysis of all different kinds. And so all the work that I do has that as its foundation. So storytelling is a way to humanize people, right? It's not just a thing that you analyze, but it is the foundation for analysis. It's also the foundation for understanding. When I teach, sometimes I tell stories because that's the best way to help people remember, to help people understand. And so it's foundational in learning. And so that's how I incorporate the humanities into all of the work that I do.
Great. So, every day people across our state are using those tools of the humanities to build community and to create space for learning and growing. Laurie, 10 years ago, PA Humanities made a major shift in how we do our work. We decided to work closely with communities, not just for them, but with them. And one of the things that came out of that shift is a program that we have across the state called Heart and Soul. Want to talk about that?
Sure thing. I've always loved what Zora Neale Hurston said about research. It's very much like humanities. That research is like formalized curiosity. It's like poking and prodding, asking those big questions that you want to explore in your life. And PA Heart and Soul does exactly that. Is the sound okay with this? Okay, all right. No. Do you want me to? It's coming in and out.
We're good on strings.
It did. Let's try it. All right, I'm going to. Do you want to turn this off?
Okay.
It's like formalized.
On the bottom. That's good. Thank you. That's all.
Sorry. Okay. Formalized curiosity, poking and prodding, to ask those big questions. And we found a decade ago that people were tired of being the problem that was going to be solved by someone else, that they wanted to have and have all the tools that they needed to take action in their communities. If there was crime, they wanted to do something about it. If there was a grocery store that was needed, or they needed anything in their communities, they wanted those tools. So what PA Heart and Soul does, it's a resident-driven process. It gives the tools to do a very large research project using storytelling. Residents are trained on how to collect stories around a single question. What do you love most about your community? It's a simple thing, but it brings people together, but you're going to get many, many different responses around what people love most. Sometimes in communities, there are 500, sometimes almost 1,000 stories that are collected, and those are all taken a look at. You look at them and then look at those values, analyze them. And sometimes some of those values, you find you're not living them. For instance, in Carlisle, a welcome community was one of the big values. But when people started to talk about that, Carlisle is the home of the Carlisle Indian School. Were we a welcome community for many years? No. And many people in the community said, we're not now either. So how do we live by those values? So that's what a simple thing like a story does in a community.
Right. And the impact that we've seen across the state, we are in 16 communities doing this process now. Some of them have graduated and some of them have just started, but 16 different PA communities that are using that process, that form of the humanities, and just say a little bit about some of the impact that we've seen.
It's been transformative. Communities, we have seen as residents have become involved, they become involved in local government. This is a program that we do hand in hand with the Department of Community and Economic Development. We work hand in hand with local government and municipalities, also with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Folks who have never been at the table at Borough Council, suddenly, as they become involved in this process, become involved in politics. They run for office, if it's for the school board or for Borough Council, and they are taking action in their communities and participating everywhere.
Yep, it's been really great to watch. So one of the biggest strengths of the humanities is the way that they can lift up diverse and often unheard narratives. So, Rhonda, I know about your project here in Erie, Lest We Forget. Can we talk about that project in terms of diverse narratives?
Okay. So before I start talking about that, I want to say I thought I was the only person who knew that Zora Neale Hurston quote. I'm actually starting a research firm called Formalized Curiosity. But I think that that's important because the ways in which we tell and keep people's stories is research, right? It informs a lot of what we should be doing in our communities. So 4 years ago now, when Erie's Black Wall Street started, I said to our fearless leader, our executive director, Kyra Taylor, that I wanted to do this project, a large-scale research project that is archival in nature, because one of the things that I found out when I got to Erie is that while I know that there is Black history, I don't see it anywhere. Even in our institutions that are supposed to house history. So, so what Lest We Forget started, well, we haven't really started it. This year is the year that we're actually going to start it. We've done this by fits and starts, but the purpose of it is to gather stories, to ask people questions, to basically do a community historical archival research project in which we gather historical evidence of the Black community, at least starting with the Black community here in Erie. We go and we ask people to participate. We ask them for their questions. We ask them questions. We ask them to give their stories. And we also ask if they have artifacts that they would like for us to record and archive for posterity. Because one of the things that is important to this project, well, not just to this project, but one of the tenets by which we live is that if your history is incomplete, if the history of your town, your city, your society, whatever, is incomplete, if it excludes people, it's a lie. And so it is important to include people who are in your community who have been instrumental in the building of it. And so we do that by storytelling. Our large-scale project, and it is a large-scale project, would enlist young people in the community to actually conduct the interviews, to basically collect data, to analyze that data, and then to tell those stories, and to treat them with care, right? So it is in part historical, it is in part archival, it is in part, not in part, it's in total research that has not been done here in the city of Erie. And after our first year, in which we work primarily with the Black community, we want to begin to go into other communities and fill in those gaps of knowledge so that we have a complete history of Erie City and County.
It sounds great. We had a similar experience in Chester, Pennsylvania. Chester is a city outside of Philadelphia. It's about 20 miles south. It's right by the airport. And it's a city, a smaller city that, like a lot of cities on the East Coast, and I think probably the analogy on the western part of the state are the Rust Belt towns, that once industry stopped, or the steel plant or the manufacturing plant moved away to China or wherever, the fortunes of the town changed and the tenor of the town changed. So Chester is one of those important places on the eastern part of the state. And we work with people in Chester and have for many, many years. And one of the things in the beginning of our working with them, the challenge was, whose narrative is it? If you only knew Chester, Pennsylvania by news reports, you would never go there. Because the only thing they ever reported from Chester was who got shot and who died and what disastrous train wreck happened over there. So long before I started at PA Humanities, Laurie and a group of people went in and started a project with the community called Chester Made. So do you want to talk a little bit about what makes Chester special? And then we have a video to show you.
Sure thing. Chester Made, and I think what's special about it is that it was named by the residents of Chester themselves. There's a famous slogan there that really harkens to the industrial heritage. What Chester makes Chester. People really believe that. When you're in the region, the vision that you get is media made. And that happens in so many Black and brown communities. It's not a city of crime. It's a city of incredibly talented, creative folks who have been working a long time in that community to make change. I think what's important about Chester Made is that we were actually invited in. We didn't go, and that's an important point. It was during the Obama administration. There were a number of cities that were part of a program called Strong Cities, Strong Communities, and working hand in hand with residents to make change. And there was a plan at the time to use arts and culture for economic development. But the one thing that the planning department had not done is that they had not asked residents. And so we were invited in to have town halls. And we said, no, town halls are where people come when they're angry. Mm-hmm. We have to set a different kind of table. And we worked hand in hand with folks in the community to ask them the simple question. And this is how we learned how to do PA Heart and Soul. What do you love most about arts and culture? And we did a cultural asset map together. And as part of that process, we named the project Chester Made, because if you're in Chester, you're made in Chester. Created a logo with artists, because owning that narrative and changing that story was essential. And it went even further, because the artists that were working downtown, it was not only about owning the story, but owning the land, owning the businesses, and owning and creating their own wealth. And so this project continues to be driven by narrative change. And I think this video...
I think so too.
Yeah.
We can see the video, and then we'll talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Stefan Roots, born and raised in Chester, resident of Chester, darn near 60 years old, so I've seen a few things around Chester. And I'm going to tell you what keeps me in Chester. I've had people come up to me and say, look, you need to get out of there. All that crime, all that poverty, all that pollution, all those problems. Why do you put up with it? How can you live there? Well, you know what I tell those people? The reason I live in Chester is because I don't want to be your neighbor. Oh, I've lived other places. Yeah. I've lived in big homes and nice neighborhoods. You know what I found? People in big homes stay in their big home. They don't come outside and play. There's no sense of community in those developments. I've lived in other areas, more affordable places outside of Chester, and let me tell you, the tension is just not comfortable for me. So I like Chester because it's like being in a warm bath. Whenever I come to this town, it's just so familiar, and the people are so genuine. They're so nice. I know so many of them. In this town, if you were born and raised here, most of the people here are born and raised. You don't have a lot of people who what's the word? Migrate to Chester. Okay, a lot of us are homegrown. So we know each other and we know each other's families. None of us are more than 2 degrees of separation from the other. If I don't know you, I know somebody who knows your family. And that means a lot because we love to talk about old times. And for many of us, we just love to talk about the future of Chester. And we love to think that this city is about to be on the comeback. And I'm staying in Chester because I want to be a part of that comeback. I want to be a part of the change that's going to come to this city. Some people are going to be prepared. There's going to be a falling out of some sorts, but there's going to be others who's going to reap the benefits, and one of those people are going to be me. Now, let me tell you the real reason why I stay in Chester. It's my mother. She's 95 years old. God bless her. Independent as can be, living in the same house she's lived in it since 1957. But she's 95 years old. She needs a little help, and that's my role. I help her out. So I'm not going anywhere as long as she's here. I tried to live with her a couple years ago. She kicked me out. So I'm only 5 blocks away. The other thing I love about Chester is it's so convenient to everything else. Even when I get tired of being here, I'm only 15 minutes from the airport, 15 minutes from Philadelphia, an hour from the mountains, the beach, New York City. Everything's so close. But you know what? Whenever I go away, even if it's for a weekend, when I come back to Chester, it's like getting back into that warm bath. I'm not going anywhere. This place is on the come up. I'm going to be a part of the come up when Chester revitalizes itself.
Contentious, yes, and one. So we know the mayor of Chester.
I knew him when.
And he is very much a part of making Chester on the rebound. I love when people do what they say they're going to do. Building off the Chester Made experience led us to another project, Voices of History. This is our newest project. It's a digital oral story initiative with the goal of collecting family stories from Black Pennsylvanians across the state. Our goal is to collect 150 stories with people talking about their family in terms of an object, an heirloom, or a specific memory. We are starting in Pittsburgh in June, and then we're coming to Erie this summer. We're going to ask people to share, and Rhonda and her friends at Erie Black Wall Street are helping us with this project. So Rhonda, tell me, how do you envision the Voices of History stories coming from Erie are going to challenge the existing narrative?
I think just being able to talk about what their experiences are, have been, what their families' experiences are and have been in Erie, is going to change the perception. And here's why, because there's not much of a perception. And so I think people being able to tell their stories will actually elevate Erie as a place, Erie as a destiny, Erie as a location that I think many people have not thought about. I mean, the longer I'm here, the more I understand that we are kind of isolated in the state. Like, everybody knows where Philadelphia is, everybody knows where Harrisburg is, everybody knows where Pittsburgh is, but when you say Erie, people are like, that's like on the other side of where is that now? Right? They know that it's on the other side of the state, but they don't know much about it. And partly, I think that's because all of our stories are not being told. So I think that this project will give people the opportunity to do that. One of the things that I also find is when I start asking people about growing up, and I think you can find this anywhere, the difference with my experience has been when I ask Black people here about their experiences growing up, I'm often one of the few people who've ever really asked them about what was the community like when you were growing up, right? People just don't ask that question. And when you don't ask that question, the factors that make a community are more easily erased. And so what I'm hoping that the project does is, this is not a word, I'm just making it up, unerase, what has been made invisible.
Thank you. We're really looking forward to it. Laurie, we've already witnessed how one story can impact an entire town. This goes back to our Heart and Soul project. One of the first Heart and Soul sites was in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and through the storytelling process and the story gathering process, what did that town find out, and how did it change that town?
The lead for that project was the Cumberland County Historical Society. It was not local government, but a historical society that wanted to authentically engage the community in collecting history. But what they found as part of this process is that you just don't go collect stories. People are not going to just come out and tell their story. You have to have a relationship with people. It's about people first. And that's what we lead with, not with content, but with people. Because if you don't have the relationship, you're not going to be able to build trust and community for folks to share. And this is what the Cumberland County Historical Society found, that they were collecting stories as they were going out to festivals, but they'd heard about a story in Mount Holly about a church that was out there. And they wanted to hear about the story from the descendant, Harriet Gumby. And it took months. And they had to go through the pharmacist that she knew. She needed to have the relationship to feel comfortable and be asked. And when they found the story, they discovered an entire history that was in Mount Holly. Her would have been great-grandfather, formerly enslaved, had built a church that was in her backyard, entirely covered with poison ivy. It was not seen. In fact, most people in the community thought it was a chicken coop. They had no idea what it was. But she didn't want to tell that story because she was afraid that her legacy would be lost, that it would be razed and taken away. And beside that was a cemetery of an African-American community, her community, and she didn't want to lose that. Once she told that story and people learned about the history, the community came together, and descendants from outside the community came together to preserve that. It's now on the historic register. It is recognized, and it transformed a community to begin to look at what was missing and who was missing in the community, and move forward to make change around that.
It's really fascinating. We went last summer and toured that church, which has been in the process of being restored. They took away the poison ivy and everything else, so you can actually see it and go in it. And the story goes that the church, when they finally were able to get inside, what had just been left. The pews were there, the Bibles were still open. It's like they had service one Sunday and didn't come back the next Sunday, and nature just took over. It's really fascinating. We were going to bring that video, but that was a little longer. But it's a really fascinating story. So, the humanities really do offer alternative ways to view our past and our present, and it really can be a powerful tool for change. But one thing we haven't talked about, because we're all in this work, I'd like to know what you think, or what you experience are the challenges of doing this work.
People are dying. The people with the memory are dying, and we're not collecting their stories fast enough. That's my wide awake middle of the night. That's one of the things that